How can we multiply the talent that we already have?
This podcast is brought to you by ArchMed, fast and focused design and manufacturing.
I'm Greg Maurer, founder and owner of ArchMed.
And I'm Caroline Squatrigo, Talent Engagement Specialist. We are on a journey to grow, learn, and gain expertise in small to mid-size company culture. Join us.
Okay, Caroline, what's the question of the day?
Well, today is going to be a little different. After hearing some really great feedback about the book Multipliers by Liz Wiseman, we decided to give it a read for ourselves and talk about what we learned on the podcast. So kicking off today's episode is Jim Buchanan. Jim is the CEO of SCP Limited, and Greg served as a member on its board of directors for a few years. Jim and Greg will discuss that time period and how the book brought about some reflection. And then we'll be joined by Archimed's CEO, John DeSalvo. John read this book a few months back and has been implementing some of the ideas that he learned. So he will have some great feedback on how the actual implementation of these concepts really works.
That's exciting, and I'm a little nervous to bring on Jim to talk about that period of my life, but here we go.
Today we are going to start by speaking with Jim Buchanan. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
All right, Jim. So I have to tell you, when I read this book, Multipliers, it didn't take but a nanosecond for me to realize, and I had to even put the book down and take a breath, that I was too often a diminisher and not often, or perhaps not at all, a multiplier when I served on your board of directors. So I put the book down, cleared my head, and called you, and I said, have you read this book? If not, pick it up and read it. And then a couple days later, you said, hey, I read the book. And then you gave me like a little pep talk over text, which I really appreciated. But so what do you think? What do you think about the book and about, my service on your board?
Yeah, I like the book a lot. I found it valuable for myself as well. And there were some spots when I was reading the book that I felt a little gut punch myself. Like there's certainly areas in my life where I've clearly been a diminisher. And so, yeah, so I appreciate you introducing me to the book. I've actually shared it with a couple of our managers. And so, yeah. And then kind of to address your question about your time on our board. And so, yeah, there were times where that was true. The interesting thing about you, which can be and I've had the benefit of knowing you for about 10 years. The huge plus to you is that you're really brilliant. And sometimes the downside to you is that you're really brilliant and that you've got a lot of answers. And so, and the experience we had on my board was you had a lot of answers that our junior finance guys didn't have. And so sometimes we found you just filling the space a lot of times in the boardroom, which prohibited them from coming forward. And so, because your acumen in that area a little bit intimidated some folks. And so that was a place where I think as we've matured, you and I've talked about this kind of, it's best to wait back and let other people fill the space sometimes. And so, but again, that's the plus and the minus of knowing and being brilliant and your stuff. So,
well, number one, I don't know about brilliant, but it sure makes me feel good that you think so. But
I know so. Anybody who's met so. but
so the book tells me exactly who I was, and I was a know-it-all, which is it's an aspect of a diminisher. I was a know-it-all. And I thought my role as a leader, as a director, was to have the right answers. to
Mm-hmm.
be right, to be correct, and to know more than the others around me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I wanted to set the direction rather than making sure the direction was set. I wanted to uh, be seen as the expert. I took up a lot of oxygen. You know, a lot of times I would just talk because I wanted to make a point. I
Mm-hmm.
needed to make a point. Um, and I took a little too much relish in the gotcha when I caught a mistake of a junior finance person and say, "Hey, see what I told you I was right," you know, that kind of stuff. I guess I felt like I needed to be an expert in the room, and the book tells me that that's exactly what a diminisher would do, and that's what occurred to me.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's true, and I think there was nothing nefarious about it. I think you showed up wanting to do exactly that job, and but I think the unintended consequences of that is it makes other people back out of the space rather than come forward. And yeah, that's my experience. And I've played the same hand in many other circles. You know, and
Yeah. So Caroline, after hearing that story, and you've known me in a different phase of my life, what do you think? What came to mind? I know you love hearing this, so what do you
No,
think?
I think Jim, I think you're right. I think a lot of people get intimidated by Greg because he is clearly just a very smart, thoughtful person who comes with a lot of answers. I myself still find myself intimidated by him at times,
No, come on.
much less so these days. But no, it's true. I think when you're in the presence of someone with that type of just like an atmospheric pull almost, it's hard not to be a little bit intimidated. But I do think through just the more that I've gotten to know you, Greg, and understand your perspective and leadership training in this podcast, I think you are much different than even like the first day that I met you 5 years ago now. So I do think that the thing I love about you is you really want to hear people's answers. I think people are just scared to tell you them. So so learning that about you helps a lot, and you do want to hear from people, which I think is a good quality to have.
Yeah, I just need to figure out how to make sure that other people realize that. So and that's, we're all on a journey, life's journey, and so I feel good that I'm making a little progress, and I hope others are as well. So Jim, number one, I wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing that story, and number two, I want to thank you for have given me the opportunity to serve you and your company a few years back. I was proud to do it, and I appreciate that you extended me that opportunity. And third, I just want to say thank you for your now decades-long friendship. I appreciate that most of all.
hey, buddy, same here. Yeah, you nailed it. We're all on the journey, right? And yeah, and I've really appreciated your growth. I've appreciated witnessing it and experiencing it. And you and I've talked a little bit about this too. Just yeah, it's been really great to witness and to be a part of in some very minor way. So
More than a minor way. I appreciate you. Thank you, friend.
yeah,
And speaking of journey, let's go get John on and talk about the book. Okay, John, welcome back. So, John, you read this book Multipliers a few months back, and you were talking to me about how it impacted in a positive way your management style, and suggested that we read it and share it with some other folks on your leadership team. And and I think it was definitely worth the read.
Yeah, I mean, I can confirm there's plenty of good information here for us to discuss today. And I think within like the first 10 pages, I realized that I have some habits I need to work on. So that's always good to get some constructive feedback from a book. So, John, I mean, like Greg mentioned, you've talked to us about multipliers and the impact that it's had on you. But I mean, why was it so important that you started to spread the word about this book around the office?
Well, the first thing is as we as an organization have been sort of on a leadership educational journey over the last 7 8 months with some training, and now how do we continue that education? And one of the reasons why the book stand really stood out to me was because you could think you're doing a fantastic job motivating or building someone up or recognizing them in the right way. But if you end the sentence or you end the meeting in the wrong way, it could completely erase all of what you've built up in from a trust standpoint, from a recognition standpoint, and really leave it negatively. And it pointed out to me how you can diminish people or that process. And Caroline, to build off of what you said, it was one of those sort of like a slap in the face of, yeah, you got some improving to do here. Like as good as you might think you are, there is a lot of opportunity for improvement, and it gave you a methodology of how to do it.
Yeah, I think also part of it is maturity. Before I read the book, many years ago, I served on the board of a company, and that was our story time that we kicked this podcast episode off with. And I realized, looking back, that I was more of a diminisher than a multiplier in that situation, in that time period of my life. And as I get older, I think naturally we mature, and that helps us become uh, multipliers. But also, this book really highlights specifically what that really means, so that you could focus on it. And it was, I think, early in the book, page 10, I think it was, where I read about how it's not really how much you know, it's about how much access you give to others of that knowledge. And it's not just how intelligent everybody else is, but how much of that intelligence do you draw out and put to use. And I never really looked at it like that. I always thought, that the value I bring is my knowledge and my intellect and my capabilities. But that is not the case. And if you always think about it in that context, you may achieve, but you will be a diminisher.
I think both of you are right on it, and there's so much to learn. I want to lay some groundwork about the book for our listeners, for those who haven't read it. So let's get into it. I mean, from you guys, what's a multiplier? What's a diminisher? What's your take on those terms and what they mean?
It stood out at the beginning of the book. I think it was around page 21, 22. It talked about as multipliers always act as challengers, and they continually challenge themselves and others to push beyond what they know. That just resonated with me so profoundly. And then the counter to that was diminishers or know-it-alls, and they just give directives. And that to me put it in the most simple terms, to where how you can easily become a diminisher just by becoming that know-it-all. And I think the example that really stood out was the poker chip example story, where when you want to be a multiplier, only give yourself so much time to talk, and make sure when you do talk, you are talking in that way of challenging and pushing, right, for the team to get better, and for them to really show what they're capable of. And those are, I think, the way I would simplify how I see multiplier or diminisher.
Yeah, and I think there's a piece to it also of, um, utilizing talent correctly. So they talk a lot about, if you're someone working for a diminisher, I mean, your talent and your output is literally diminished. I mean, you might lose confidence, you might not feel like you have the capability to take on big projects, or you might just be frustrated that you're always being, everything's being completely spelled out for you how to do it and you're not actually being challenged. Whereas when you're reporting to a multiplier, you surpass, what you thought was 100% of your capability. Typically, you're multiplying your capability, where you're, quite literally being challenged and finding more ways to be more efficient and think things through in a new way. So I like the terms because they're very literal in, here's your impact on those around you when you act this way. And the goal is obviously to multiply here. So
Yeah, what you're really talking about here, Caroline, is that becoming a multiplier and changing diminishers into multipliers is good business. Uh, a quote from the book: "Diminishers come at a high cost," and yes, they do, absolutely. And the multipliers, extend. It's like the candle. You have a lit candle and you light somebody else's candle. Your candle is still lit, and now theirs is, and it adds brightness. That's the multiplier. It's extending intelligence. So one of the things the multiplier does is inspire the people around him or her by extending the intelligence. So if you say to a person, "You're intelligent, you're capable, you can do this," you are multiplying them through inspiration. And that person, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whether that person is told that they can do it by a multiplier or told that they can't by a diminisher, either way, they're right. So the trick is to put yourself in company of multipliers, believe in yourself, and get motivated and inspired.
And Greg, the example that stood out to me, and as you and I are well into our 40s now, maybe it's a little bit too soon for Caroline, but when you think about teachers that you had, the ones that you remember are the ones that were multipliers, right? They stood out to you. They made you better. They cared about you. They they supported you in the right way. And it's just so vivid that there are just a handful that, at least that I can remember, that actually did that throughout everything that I learned through school. And it's the same way with leaders in my career. Like there's just that couple that really stand out, and those are the true multipliers that we've come across in our lives.
Yeah, and one thing about those folks is they expected a lot. So becoming a multiplier involves supporting and inspiring, but it also involves high expectations. It's a comfortable space, a safe space, but it also can be an intense space. And so, we talked already about attracting and optimizing talent on this podcast, but that's one of the first disciplines of the multiplier, right? Is you said, John, the diminisher is an empire builder. The multiplier builds teams. It's a talent magnet. And the second discipline is this intensity that you demand the best thinking, the best work from your folks. And I think that we can have an environment that is both comfortable and safe, so people can share their opinions and advocate for things that may or may not be the right ideas, but also high expectations and some intensity. I like that construct. I used to think that those things were mutually exclusive, but they're not.
I like the create intensity piece here because often when I'm self-reflecting and I feel like I've pushed someone too far, or maybe I'm not managing correctly, my default is like, okay, well, I need to back off. I need to make them feel comfortable. I need to tell them it's okay. And that's like not the point. That's not the right thing to do. And it's okay to have these big expectations. A lot of it is just in the delivery and how do you set it up? Am I setting it up saying, I need you to do 1, 2, 3, 4 tasks? Or am I saying, here's a challenge, let's talk about it. How are we going to work through this? And that was a big one where you're allowed to expect these big things from people and create that pressure, but it was like pressure without stress, which honestly I don't know how to achieve yet. So that'll be a learning block for me. I don't know, Greg and John, if you have a key to creating that environment, but that was one thing that stuck out to me was multipliers make an environment that has a lot of pressure, but it doesn't have that stressful, like on edge feeling about it.
Yeah, it's more art than science, and it's situational. But I think that if you have high expectations and you demand a lot, and there's some intensity around what's going on in that situation, whether it's project or whether it's deadlines or what have you, um, that that is both pressure and stress. And so when you provide that, you have to then reduce the stress. And I think that's the inspiration, the confidence. I know you can do it. If there are obstacles in your way, I can help get rid of those. That kind of stress reduction, I think, is what's needed when you create the pressure. You need to reduce the stress.
And we created this podcast, this the culture thesis, and we've heard from all of these outstanding people, and the line that's really stood out to me about, if I was to define or find something in this book that defined what I see Archimed from a culture standpoint. It said, multipliers liberate people from the oppressive forces within the corporate hierarchy. They free people to think, to speak, and to act with reason. And they give people permission to think and allow the best ideas to surface. If we could do that every day, we nailed it. I mean, that to me just was, if I could say that every day and in every situation, that in every meeting we have, that there is no greater ideal state than that.
Yeah, and the leader who's a multiplier may come into dozens of meetings with an idea of his or her own, but the right idea is more important than their idea. And so I have to look at my job as getting the best idea, not having the right idea. And the book also states that if you have a good team and the idea gets a lot of support from a lot of people, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is having a team that you trust and that trusts you, and that's when you can extend these big lofty challenges that people might look at you and think you're crazy, we're never going to get there. But gaining that buy-in from your team and motivating them to get onto this, onto the same page of, well, let's just try it and see if we can achieve it. We have a great team of people to do that. I think that's the beauty of the multiplier, is you're stretching an organization to get to where you think is the best place to go, and a lot of that is driven by your team and not necessarily you.
Yeah, and the flip side of this great idea is the diminisher who kills other people's ideas. But I like this concept of the accidental diminisher. So there are folks who are well intentioned, but they unintentionally kill other people's ideas. And I think I have done that in the past, and there's an anecdote to that. That the antidote is to be approachable and to provide the safety for other people to speak their minds. And the multiplier isn't necessarily soft. They're calm, but they're not soft. And I think you can, that's helpful to understand that these things that on their face sound like mutually exclusive aren't. You could be calm and open-minded, but still demanding and not soft.
I learned a new term. You're imposing the anxiety tax, right? Like when they talked about the tyrant, right? And I know I've worked for many a tyrants in my career, but they talked about how tyrants impose an anxiety tax, and it consumes the mental energy of people to avoid upsetting the tyrant. And I think there are many examples throughout our lives, whether it's someone in our family or someone at work, where we're like, oh, if we say this in front of them, I know exactly what's going to happen, and it's not going to be good. And it is. It's because it's that unpredictable behavior. You know that this tyrant, you know that they're just going to fly off the handle in one way or another, and we truly avoid that. And I love that maybe we can implement this at Archimed, is you're imposing an anxiety tax on me right now. And I think that maybe that would be a good way to break the ice and stop them from being that diminisher.
Yeah, give a little bit of clarity, a little self-reflection.
Yeah, I mean, that anxiety just shuts people down. So I think if we can make a little bit of fun with it, and then we can move on together. One thing with that is, when I think in order to get the team all together moving in the same direction, one thing that stuck out to me was, as a leader, it's not necessarily your job to set the direction, but you want to make sure that a direction gets set. And I think that goes to your point, Greg, of, you're not here to have all the answers. You're just here to make sure we get to an answer. And that spoke to me a lot, because I think often we have these meetings coming in with a plan and some idea of where to go. And it's almost like I want to know the facts of the situation, but not have a plan yet, so that we can get there together, or just like watch the team work to get there.
Yeah, and that's the fourth discipline of the multiplier. So, number one, attract and optimize talent. Number two, create that intensity that requires best thinking. Number three, extend those challenges, have expectations, require that the organization stretch. And then the fourth is debating the decision. So it's like you said, Caroline, it's not about whether you have the right answer, but it's more important about that the right answer is achieved by the group. And if you think about what you learned in civics class about how our Constitution was developed and how our country was founded, it was on discussion and debate and dissent. And that combination creates sound decisions. And yet it doesn't seem that we've taken that winning formula and applied it throughout our business discussions. There's, I guess, maybe there's too much ego or what have you, but I think that we need to encourage that debate and that dissent so that we can get the best answer.
Yeah, and Greg, you touched on it. It's that maybe it is that piece of ego, and it talks about in the book, the leader must be addicted to growing other people, and that's a huge hurdle for a lot of leaders to get over because they want to they want to put their stamp on things. They want to make things successful, but that addiction to growing other people and the team thriving is just so critical. And at the core, you recognize that the greatest value is not on your intelligence, but the intelligence of the entire team. Speaks to getting over that ego piece. But and again, that's one of those where it kind of slaps you in the face and says, "Hey, just stop doing that." Like you're being a diminisher when it's about you.
Yeah, the orchestra director plays no instrument.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that ego gets into the know-it-all concept that this book brings up. And if you're the diminisher in this case who knows it all, you're that person who always has to be right, always has to be one-upping, always has to have the right answer. And it's just not it's not productive to act that way. And that's when people just don't even want to bring up their ideas, because what's the point? Where you get into the challenger, in this case, being that multiplier who's challenging, and it's much more about just getting people to believe that whatever that it is, that it's possible. And I think that's where you can take the ego out of it and just say, how do we get at this as a team and just get behind the idea overall.
Yeah, and so I feel pretty good about these first four disciplines of a multiplier. And I think our entire leadership team does a lot of these things well. I certainly think we attract and optimize talent. I certainly try and create an intensity, and we demand the best work. We extend challenges and want the group to stretch. I know that's the case. I think we can do a better job with debating decisions, with inspiring dissent and encouraging that kind of debate. And part of that is, as John said, is speaking last as a leader, and to not come in and with the idea, but your goal is to get the best idea from others. But here's where I really run into a problem is the fifth discipline of a multiplier is to instill ownership and accountability. And instilling ownership means you aren't the hero. And I have a temptation when there's a problem that's being debated to swing in, take the lead, solve the problem, not because I want to be the hero, but because I'm oriented that way. I'm oriented to achieve the success, solve the problem, do the task, whatever it is. And rather than do that, I need to invest the resources in others. I need to empower others. And then I can, as we've discovered, expect them to show me the results. But that is very unnatural for me. That's my hurdle, is to be a full multiplier.
Yeah, I think I fall into that bucket as well, Greg. And I was talking to John about this when I first started reading the book. And I like to come into a meeting with an answer and then say, what do you want to, what do you think about it? And everyone's like, well, she already has a plan. I guess she's just going to own it. And here's the answer. And I've been challenging myself to stop doing that and come in to say, okay, here's the problem. And, what do you guys think we should do about it? And I think that itself instills that ownership, because if they're coming up with the idea, well, it's their idea. And I think that helps. I'm not good at this still, I will say. This is beginning stages of fixing this for myself, but we're working on it.
And that's what's so great about the book is, like, I don't care how good you are. You're going to identify things you can work on. When I look at um, 3, 4, and 5 are the areas that I concentrate on the most. I again, I always see myself as the spark, the person to create the enthusiasm, and it says there was a line in the book that says when the leader is always on, everyone else is always off, and and that's one of those where, and it gets back to what you said, Greg, is I got to just stop being on sometimes. I got to let other people be on, and just sit back and let those things happen, and put those measures in place to get that, instilling that ownership and accountability, and allowing the debate of decisions, and extending those challenges, because if not, everyone else is just waiting for me to do it, and that's a
Yeah, and
diminishing
one of the
mindset.
things I've taken to, so my natural seat, I don't know why this is, I always sit at the head of the conference table for meetings, and I think that's not helpful to be a multiplier. So I've taken to sitting elsewhere, so that it's not viewed as I'm chairing this meeting, but I'm just a participant, and I'm giving space to others to run meetings and to manage the discussions and debates. And empowering others is literally giving them ownership, and giving them ownership means that you are going to allow for a result that you didn't control. And so for some folks, who want to have control over things, and I have a tendency to want to do that, that can be a challenge.
One thing that this book mentioned that really stuck out to me was talking about people's native genius and finding their native genius. Now I've been trying to observe people a little bit better. I think I've been off my game doing that, but it's all about find what someone's naturally good at, and it could be something they have no idea that they're really good at because it's just so ingrained in them. And the book uses an example of someone who's great at walking people through challenges in meetings, and when people get stuck, they call her up to the front of the room because she asks the right questions, and she's like, I don't even know what the big deal is that I do this. This is just how I approach things. And that's the whole point. It's like, what are people doing that they don't even realize that they are really good at? And they're really good at it because it comes so naturally. And seeing that in people, identifying it to them, and then giving them the opportunity to use that, I think is really powerful.
It made me think of, I love that concept too. And it's, for me, it's a lot easier said than done. But it's an ideal, certainly something we should strive for in each of the folks that we work with and that work for us. But I can think of instances where employees are struggling, but they're capable. They have value for the organization. And why are they struggling? It's sort of this concept of the right person in the right seat, and the right seat is not just capability, but it's also native genius. And so we have to acknowledge the counterpart to native genius is a inability to function in certain scenarios and certain roles. So if someone's struggling, but they clearly have value to give to the organization and the team, perhaps we should really sit down and think, what is this person's native genius? How can we get them to extend that to the benefit of others?
Well, I think we have a great example of that uh, on this podcast today. And I think when we look back 3 years when Caroline joined this organization, and was in a marketing internship type role, and what you've now accomplished in a talent acquisition, in community engagement. Do you feel like you're starting to find your native genius? Is it something you're becoming comfortable with?
I don't know. I think maybe that's the point, though, is that I don't know. I do feel like now that I've been in this role for a bit, I feel much more comfortable, and I can just start rattling off like facts about Archimed and like selling us as a brand and all of that, which I guess has comes a bit naturally to me at this point. So yeah, I guess maybe it's like one of those things. I don't know, John, but I guess maybe that's my natural talent. we'll see. Guess we'll see how all this all plays out.
I think it's hard for someone to recognize their own native genius, and the book puts that responsibility on the multiplier. I think it could be fun at one of our next leadership retreats or something like that, where we have the team together, executive team together, to ask each person to write down the native genius of all the others, and then when we synthesize that, we could really see that would be really fun to see, and I think it would be a good exercise also to allow folks to concentrate on the value of others too. Um, and I think, John, you're also an example. Um, first of all, people have multiple native geniuses, right? Or they could be broad. And John, when you joined Archimed, you clearly had a operational native genius. You clearly had a very strong operational ability to run a plant. But lo and behold, you had a sales native genius. You found that out by necessity, right? Because you said, I have to, as the chief executive, step into the sales role. Got a little training, but clearly you have native genius for sales. I thought I thought of that just as you mentioned.
Yeah, and that's the fun. The fun is the when we do take that multiplier mindset, we can list off example after example of what we've done here at Archimed to grow this culture and this organization by giving people that space, demanding their best work, challenging them to learn quickly, right? And then giving them that opportunity to find their native genius or what we may thought they would be good at. And it has proven whether across the board with a lot of different folks here where they didn't come in with any of those job experiences, but they have just settled into their roles in great ways and they have really helped us as a company grow. And that's what's exciting when you do apply these multiplier uh, processes and theories.
Yeah, and a lot of this so far has been about what you can do, actions you can take. Speaking last in the meeting and studying people to find their native genius and um, that kind of thing. But the book also covers some assumptions, and when we talk about culture, we often talk about actions and assumptions, and they're both really really important. And so the multipliers assumptions, and number one about genius is if I can find someone's genius, I can put them to work. So that's a belief, right? I assume that people have a native genius, and if I can find it, I can put it to work. And I think that's something that I'm going to write these down and look at them on a regular basis, because these are things I want to make as part of my own assumptions. And there are others. There's another one. People's best thinking must be given, not taken. I thought that was really interesting. That's about creating space for others to thrive. And when they have that space and they have expectations and they have the resources that they need, they will give their best work. That's a belief.
I think the whole point of putting someone in the role that really fits what they love to do and gives them that ability to do their best thinking, I think is crucial. And I love how open that we are to that. And I know there have been times that we've brought someone in and it was just clear they were not in the right role, but they were a great worker. And we're like, we know this person has the right attitude. And it's crazy when you put them in that correct role to see the immediate shift and change in them and how much more confident and comfortable they feel to do their best thinking and give all these great ideas. And I think that seeing that is just speaks for itself as to what that can do for an organization.
Yeah, it's very rewarding to see somebody thrive like that.
Going on to the next assumption, people get smarter by being challenged. And we've talked about this already a little bit, but it's not just the goal of let's challenge people to get this goal for the company. It's making everybody smarter. So we've talked about multiplying capability. I mean, that's what you're doing. So you don't just live your entire life with the same amount of capability. You can be challenged and you can grow. And I think we've all experienced being able to kind of one up yourself, and that's kind of fun to do. And I think the multiplier gives people the tools to do that and get smarter by doing and by thinking and by creating.
It reminds me also of the David Cody book, Winning Now, Winning Later. He talks a lot about being challenged, and the way he phrased it is, I'll paraphrase, amazing things have come from the rational expectations of managers. And I think that's related to this other assumption, is that people need to be challenged in order to reach their potential.
With that, the next assumption is with enough minds, we can figure it out. And I mean, that right there says it all. We've talked about the importance of debating. If you get enough people in a room, the debate will happen and you'll naturally come to like the best idea or the best solution for a given situation. So including people, I think, is really critical to having that success. And that's where, the diminisher who comes in with all the answers can be a huge detriment, because if you're shutting down all those minds, you're not going to get to where you need to go.
Yeah, I'm thinking about on our plant floor, the way you solve problems is through a gate call where you bring all of the relevant minds together, whether that's an engineer, quality, operations, machinist, what have you. Bring all those folks together to address the problem, think about it, and solve it jointly. And we ought to do that in the boardroom as well. We ought to do that when we set strategy and talk about vision and discuss, debate, and dissent with enough minds. We believe that we'll reach a great outcome. We'll find the best idea.
Yeah, and Greg, I actually hung this quote up on my wall here in the office that goes along with that, which out of this book, which is the most powerful work is done in response to an opportunity, not in response to a problem. Right? So looking at the failure or the mistake as the opportunity for improvement, right? Not as a problem, not as a this person or this issue. It's we've identified an opportunity to improve. So let's get all these people together. Let's talk about the right way to approach this, to put preventative type measures in place rather than addressing it as someone's problem. That to me is very powerful when you think about, because diminishers like to look at everything as a problem statement, as this is your problem or someone else's, instead of that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think also diminishers will convene people when there's a problem, but multipliers will convene people and challenge them to find opportunity. So the last assumption in this multiplier's mind is believing that people are smart and capable, and that they don't need you to hold their hand throughout each little step, but they're capable and they'll get it done and they'll figure it out. And that belief is really freeing. Obviously, you need to have great people, and that if you find their native genius and do all these other things, you'll have a great team, and then you have to believe in them. That's the assumption, is you have a great team. You don't need to hold their hand. They're going to figure it out. They're going to get it done. They're going to go crush it.
I think that says it all, and it's not enough to just give people the space to come up with the idea. I mean, you have to let them execute it. You have to trust that they will execute it. And I think that's just kind of the final piece of the puzzle for becoming a multiplier. And I think having them laid out like this, these assumptions laid out like this, it's a great thing to be able to quickly look at, like you said, Greg, and just have them front of mind to remember to live these every day to help support your team in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, John, are you working with your team members to turn folks who tend towards diminishing to become multipliers?
I think myself, as well as both of the other people on this podcast today, can attest to the fact that it's something that I strive for every day. Um, it all starts with us as a leadership team, and the way we portray our ability to lead and involve others every single day. And you see the benefits when you are a multiplier. You immediately see, and that's why the term multiplier, right? When you do it right, it's amazing how quickly things happen and improve. But when you diminish, you see it on teams, you see it in the faces of people, you see it in the way they come through the door if they're working for or having diminishing type feedback. So it's I love it. It's what drives me, and it's exciting. So I appreciate you guys partaking in and reading the book along with me, and hopefully you also got some good
Yeah,
stuff out of
thanks
it.
for recommending it, and I want the listeners to realize that it's a continuum. It's not binary. You're not either a diminisher or a multiplier. You have a little bit of everything, and some more than others, and it could be situational. So, and it's not judgmental. It's just it's a journey to become a multiplier. It's not a judgment. So thanks, John, for coming on to talk about the book. I hope the readers go out and read it and take it to their teams and improve their work. It's been helpful for me so far, and I hope it's helping others as well. Well, that was fun. It was great that John recommended the book to us. I'm grateful for that because it's really going to change how I interact with other folks.
In our next episode, we will discuss the idea of authenticity and its impact in the workplace. Joining us will be Adam Weber. Adam is the author of the book Lead Like a Human, and he is also co-founder and chief people officer of Amplify.